Hey everybody, welcome back to Drew the Catholic. Today we have a super special episode. I actually have two guests on, which is rare. We got one person in-house. This is Daniel Carnes, who is an investment analyst and financial planner at Eldorado Financial.
What's up?
And then we have Andy Flattery, and he's a CFP as well. What was the name of your business, Andy?
Yeah, hey Drew. Andy, I'm with Simple Wealth Planning in Kansas City.
Awesome. And today we're going to have a discussion about financial planning, about Catholicism and the principles of financial planning, is how that would intersect with our faith. But more specifically than that, the reason I wanted these two guys on is to talk about Bitcoin. There have been some conversations in the Catholic sphere on YouTube about Bitcoin. And obviously Daniel and I are friends in real life, and we both have talked about Bitcoin a lot. And then we ran into Andy, who also has done some work about Bitcoin. And I just felt like it'd be a good episode to discuss what it is, kind of clear up some misconceptions about, the actual technology of Bitcoin, and then just talk with each other about that and what that might mean from a Catholic and Christian perspective, if it's something that's, permissible to get involved in or not. So with that, I'll give you guys both an opportunity just to introduce yourselves for a bit and your background, like 30 seconds or so. So Daniel, if you want to kind of tell us about you.
Yeah, Daniel Carnes. I got my start in the industry several years ago. I worked my way up through Charles Schwab. I was a stockbroker. My wife worked at Vanguard, so it was FINRA's version of Romeo and Juliet, I guess. So long story short, in case you don't know, financial industry regulatory authority.
Nice.
So
yeah.
anyway, so we've been married for a while, and then we ended up both in the finance industry. We were offered the opportunity to move out of Phoenix and move to Colorado. We are part of an RIA firm, Eldorado Financial. It's been around for 25 years. It was started by my father-in-law in Denver, and we're really living really good lives here in Montrose. I love what I do. I'm the investment analyst. I just do all the investment stuff.
He just sends me memes. That's all he does.
Pretty much. Memes about the market and Bitcoin and all that. So
Cool.
That's just me.
Andy, tell us a bit about you and your background.
Yeah, all right. So Andy Flattery, and I'm here in Kansas City, Missouri. I own a firm where we do wealth management and financial planning for families in Kansas City and around the nation. I was one of these proverbial buttoned up financial planners who was dismissive of Bitcoin, as we are wont to do. And I started looking into it for the purpose of being able to rebut friends and clients that were asking about it. I thought, well, I should probably know something about this if I'm going to tell them not to buy it. And throughout that process, I became convinced that it was not only worthy of study, but potentially even worthy of owning and potentially a force for good in the world. So that's kind of how I became the CFP Bitcoin guy. I've got a podcast called The Reformed Financial Advisor. And as a Catholic guy, I started a Substack called Bitcoin Papist, which is going to address some of these areas of intersection that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, that's awesome. When we saw your podcast, I was like, wait, Reformed Financial Advisor.
He's a Catholic, but he's a Calvinist? What?
Well, no, I was guessing you don't mean Reformed in terms of like Reformed Presbyterian theology because you're a Catholic. So is that just like Reformed as in, like, explain the name, I guess.
It's funny. I need to change the name because Eric Salmon said the same thing to me, and it just shows how tone deaf I am. In kind of like financial Twitter circles, there's this guy named Josh Brown, and he's the Reformed broker. And his whole spiel was he worked on Wall Street for years and saw all the sins of that business, realized he needed to kind of convert from the Reformed broker to what he does now. And he makes a lot of great points. And I said, well, he's kind of right, but the financial advisors are wrong as well too, in certain ways. And so that's kind of how it became the Reformed Financial Advisor. So there's no religious connotation to it at all, as you might be alluding to. It's more about kind of unpacking financial heresies that we see today, where it's sort of unquestioned that the thing that you should do is, invest in index funds and scoff at Bitcoin as we are told to do.
I found you, or I think Drew found your blog, sends it to me. I start reading it, and I'm like, where I didn't know I had a long lost brother.
You guys are like the same person.
We're like the same guy. You just
nice.
look a little bit more handsome than I do.
Nice, man.
You got the
I
little
like that.
swoop in your hair. It's great.
It's a beautiful thing about, just doing this. Like, it's always a joy to be on someone else's show, and because you can find who your tribe is around the country. And that's, I don't know, this is maybe a weird conversation in the broader circles, because there's not a lot of like TradFi bros that are like talking about the merits of Bitcoin, but here we are.
So I have to I always ask this one question to every Bitcoiner I meet: what orange pilled you?
Well, I think, like I said, I was a hater, and I said a lot of the things that our opponents that maybe we'll talk about are saying now. And I had a buddy that was like, "Hey, just read the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous." And for folks that aren't familiar, it's probably if you're going to read one book on this, that's probably the one worth reading.
Yep.
And I started reading it as a skeptic, and by the end of it, I was like, wow, this kind of changes everything about not only my business, but like a lot of kind of what we see in the world today is the result of broken money. And so, yeah, that was it. How about you?
For me, it was, so I was a broker, moved out to Colorado, became a financial advisor. It was then I had the time and the energy to be like, okay, I might as well dedicate my whole life to understanding what money is and how it works.
That makes sense for your job.
Right.
Least, yeah.
And so it wasn't, so the Bitcoin Standard came later, but it was the Creature of Jekyll Island. And basically it's, I'm trying to remember his name. Totally drawing a blank right now, but no, the Creature of Jekyll Island basically spells out the whole history of the Federal Reserve System. And then what Saifedean Ammous did with the Bitcoin Standard was give money a historical context. And when you realize, oh, so the Romans did this, the Chinese in the 10th century did this, the English did it, the Dutch did it, now you're kind of getting into Ray Dalio's Changing World Order. So there is a historical context to money and how it works. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. You know who Art Laffer is, right?
Yeah, Laffer curve guy.
Yeah, so Art Laffer's disciple, Kathy Wood, she was one of Art Laffer's students way back in the day. And Art Laffer, for those who don't know, he's Ronald Reagan's economic advisor. He, created the Laffer curve. He's the reason why the government hasn't taxed you out the wazoo. So Kathy was on another podcast and she was saying, back in 2015, she gave Art Laffer a whole research paper that she and her team put together. And she said, red ink it as much as you can. Just find any flaw in this. And this is when Kathy was looking into Bitcoin. And he sits there and he goes, we've been looking for something like this since the gold shock in 71 when Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. And I was like blown away. You're telling me this old, supply side economist is getting into Bitcoin.
So Bitcoin was the thing that they were looking at.
Well,
okay.
Yeah. So there's so much to break down, and I don't want to monopolize the time.
I can talk about my orange pill moment.
What was me?
It was my orange pill moment was I discovered Bitcoin. Gosh, probably right after it came out, maybe a year or so. It was like 2012.
Oh,
and right. I was working at Subway. I was in high school, and I had like $500 laying around. And I saw this Bitcoin thing, and I was a huge tech nerd, like coding websites for fun because I was just a dweeb. And I was like, yo, I should throw just $500 that I have into Bitcoin. And I told my dad about it, and I tried to explain it, and he's like, well, you'll probably lose all your money, but go for it. And I was like, shoot, I'd rather have like that $500 for the summer to like, go see movies and like buy a bunch of Mountain Dew and, play some video games, play some Halo or whatever. And that's what I did with it. And then come, like 10 years later, my dad pulled me aside one time and he's like, hey, that was the worst thing I ever told you to do. It was only $500. I should have told you to put it in Bitcoin because we did the math on it. It would have been worth millions. So then I was like, wait, I got to understand this now.
So I'm
very different orange pill.
So my thing is like, yeah, it sucks. But at the same time, back then there were not really any good storage practices. There were no
Everyone was
legitimate
that was
exchanges.
back when it was Mount Eden or whatever, and everyone
Mount
lost
Gox,
Mount Gox. That's what it was.
There's
Everyone lost all their
there's
Bitcoin.
some programmer, web developer guy in California who has his laptop or
it's like stuck on there.
He has like one last try to access his like 30 some odd million in Bitcoin. I know. So it's
okay. So for both of you, you're both orange pilled. You both like Bitcoin. Have your different ways of getting there. We all do. For people who are listening that are completely uninitiated in all of that talk, I'm going to try and ground this at their level so that we can kind of make it accessible for the layperson. Andy, how would you describe Bitcoin briefly to someone who maybe doesn't have the biggest financial chops in terms of that type of speech?
Yeah, I think the best place to start, and by the way, these are like all the conversations I have. I was just chatting with a couple in their 70s about Bitcoin yesterday,
Awesome.
And so part of what I want to do is like try to be that guy that can actually explain things in very simple terms, which is not one of my strengths, but I'm learning. I think the best place to start is everyone should just pull up that Bitcoin white paper. Just Google it and read it. And
I can put it in the comments.
The very first sentence kind of says most of what you need to know to at least get a foot in the door. It says a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash that would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. And I think that is kind of says it all in a very succinct way. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to recreate cash, which really still exists, which is great, but you can kind of see this movement to sort of take cash away from us. It's being sort of taken out of the market. And I think that's not all for good. And furthermore, like you and I are doing more and more of our interactions on the internet. Like we're talking to each other across the country right now. And so to this point, or at least to the invention of Bitcoin, all of the monetary exchange on the internet had to come with a financial intermediary in between us. Mm-hmm. And so, you have to work with a credit card company or some bank or something like that just to be able to exchange money online. Well, Bitcoin fixes that. It's now you can now exchange cash almost instantly anywhere in the world at any time, and that's pretty cool.
So, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say is what the importance of the peer-to-peer thing does is it aligns incentives on monetary policy. So, one of the kind of downfalls to centralized control of the money, money being controlled by like one issuer, is that the incentives are misaligned. Whereas a peer-to-peer system, if Daniel's got Bitcoin or he's running a node, if Drew is a Bitcoiner, we are all kind of running the network together, and so our incentives are aligned. So therefore, Drew is not going to be able to inflate the money because I'm not going to allow that, and vice versa. And so that's one way that kind of fixes this problem of inflation. And so I just think that sentence is probably the best place to start. You can unpack several pieces of that. A peer-to-peer version of electronic cash is what it is.
Cool.
Daniel, what would you add to that to kind of maybe you'll probably take it a little more complex from there, because I think that is a good overview. It kind of outlines all the key points of what the technology does.
Yeah. So I mean, a tactic, for lack of a better term, that I've adopted is, I just had a client in my office, 70 some odd years old, and he starts asking me about Bitcoin. And and he was telling me how his wife wants to start throwing it into gold. I'm like, okay, so let's look at gold for a second. How much gold is on this floating rock in space? I don't know. Wall Street doesn't know. The Chinese, the Russians, the English, the Federal Reserve, that are, whether or not they're actually buying gold, or I'm sure
then we find the asteroids with gold.
And all thanks to our brother Elon. So, okay, well, you don't know how much gold there is. We can go to Mount Snuffles, however many miles away from here, hit the whole mountain with a pickaxe, and now you got all this gold that could be there. Flush that into the market, supply and demand starts dropping. So you have a problem with there, right? And he goes, and there's not really a lot of like solid facts of how much gold there's actually in the world, right? And she goes, yeah. I'm like, okay. Well, here's the other thing. Let's say you have gold in your hand. It's nice and physical. give me your gold. So now you have to secure it, and you have to either secure it and pay the cost of securing it in like a vault or something. And you have to make sure that it can't be stolen from you. So that's kind of why I mentioned earlier, thank God you didn't get into Bitcoin, because there was not a lot of good storage practices back then. So what I was trying to do is unpack the 5 basic rules of money. Okay. Divisibility, durability, portability, recognizability. Oh, now you have to spend money to get a special contraption to actually prove to you that your gold is actually gold, not just some rock spray painted gold. And then the last rule that money actually is scarce. And then, you mentioned the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Amos. The whole story towards the beginning of the book about the Rye Stone and, the sea captain that got shipwrecked there and then just introduced a giant flood of new Rye Stones into that economy and watching the economy completely just get desecrated. I mean, it makes all the kind of sense.
Familiar.
Right, exactly. So, and I told this client, I said, okay, you understand, and he was Series 7, a Series 6 or Series 7 license back in the day. It's like, you understand that we're $33.5 trillion in national debt, and 45% of that debt's going to come due in the next year and a half. And he goes, yeah. You understand that the government is spending way too much. Like, we're $2 trillion deficit just for 2023 alone, right? And he goes, yeah. And I go, what are you going to do? What could you do to diversify? What could you do that hedges you, for lack of a better term, from that devaluation? Everyone's saying that Bitcoin's not a hedge against inflation. It's a hedge against currency devaluation. And that's ultimately what we're seeing right now. And what I'm trying to get as much of my clients prepared for too.
I think one of the, so I totally agree. Yeah. You just start, Bitcoin is money, as you just said, and here are the properties of money. And here's how Bitcoin is a great example of how it epitomized the properties of money. But some folks might just say, okay, big deal. Like the cash is trash.
Yeah.
Cash is trash, or like money is an abstraction, or money is an idol.
Mm-hmm.
And so they might say, like, big deal. Like, why do we need, like, money works fine. And so I think it might be worth kind of pointing out just how important the invention of money is, or how it is useful to have money. But because I think sometimes that point is missed too, when we kind of are dismissive of the fact that, like, actually it's like, if you really think about, like, money is kind of a useful invention. It's kind of important that it was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Fiat currency came from the 10th century in China. And when Genghis Khan invaded, they were like, oh, well, we got to pay for this war. We need to print. That was the first ever experiment of printing money and inflation. And it ended up horribly for those guys. The other thing I would say too is, and kind of the angle I come from is, okay, what is your value system? Well, this is what I believe. Okay, you believe that. Here's your value systems. Here's Bitcoin and the problems that it solves, and marries those two things together. I was part of the Rotary Club here in town, and in Rotary, there's the 3-way test, or the 4-way test. The things that we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair? Does it build goodwill and better friendships? And does it benefit all concerned? I did a presentation like 3 years ago on Bitcoin, and I addressed every single one of those. No one had an answer for me.
Well, hang on. I'm just so curious about this though. Did you present to like a group of like boomers in Rotary Club?
Pretty
like,
much.
Did they even comprehend it? Like
pretty much.
They might have just not have any understanding what you're talking about.
Well, no. So, but that wasn't the point. The point was, okay, if you believe what you say you believe,
it lines up.
Give me an explanation why this doesn't work. The biggest problem I have, the clients, the hardest people is the clients that just want the little physical thing. They want the physical gold. Real estate agents, all they know and love is real estate. You know what I mean? And so because it's the problem with Bitcoin is that it's such an abstract concept. Here's another way. So do you trust the government to keep your currency stable? No. Okay. Well, what about a bunch of independently self-verifying computers across the whole entire globe processing a algorithm based on the idea of 2 to the power of 256. Just the mathematics behind it. And I got a bachelor's in computer information technology. Just the mathematics behind the computing power of Bitcoin's network and the Bitcoin miners and what they're doing and what they're verifying, the paper trail. We can go back and look, 7 years ago what so-and-so did, sold their Bitcoin for. We have that documentation. We don't have, Pentagon can't even pass an audit.
I do think that's one of the powerful things, because I remember when I was learning about the technology, for me, one of the things that I thought about is like, what tangible actual value does this have, right? Because like we can talk about the actual value of gold because it's a real tangible asset, and it aside from just being shiny and attractive to like the human psyche, it does have properties that are inherently useful, whether it be in like computer microchips or whatever, and we like it because it's shiny. And I think for a lot of people, that's probably the touch point of like, okay, so Bitcoin is a money system. You can use it to exchange value. And it kind of eventually at some point is about, we have to agree that it's money for money to work. But like, is there any actual value? And for me, one of the things I think about is that like the fact that we have this whole network of computers that we've created that can execute code, and it's purely input output, right? Like a computer can't determine how to execute code. It just runs. Like if you just type in a line of code and then hit run, the computer just does it. And then the problem falls back on the code, right? And so if you have that is an assemblage of value that performs a function in the same way that like gold might have chemical properties that are useful for things in real life, right? So I think there is in a unique way in the digital sphere inherent value in that system, right? But it's not in the same way like as we would find in something that's naturally occurring, but it is like purely because humans have invented it in such a way that it can't be manipulated, right? And that's kind of like, I think the thing that drew me is like Wells Fargo, where I bank with for my business, really bad choice, I know. They could just change their central ledger and like there'd be lawsuits and all that stuff, but like theoretically they've
already been sued a lot. I'm just
it's
saying.
happened, right? But with Bitcoin, you kind of can't do that. So I think for like the person listening, that's like, what actual value does it have? The way the network itself works probably is the value. Andrew, what would you think about that? Like, would you add anything to that for the person who's thinking like, okay, he said, why would I care?
It's a good place to kind of start. And I think, a really fundamental way to think about it is this whole conversation between like the subjective value or like versus like, for example, like the labor theory of value or something like that. And so, as a Catholic, like we can look to actual like commentators throughout the centuries that have talked about this various thing in other areas. So for example, I think there was a commentator that was talking about like the difference between the price of wheat in like the Indies. So for example, like the early Americas as opposed to the price of wheat in Spain, and the intrinsic value of wheat in the Indies is the same as it is in Spain, but it was more desired in the Americas. And so there's this commentator who's part of this school of thought called the School of Salamanca, which they're kind of like the patron saints of the Bitcoiners, if you will. A lot of folks have talked about the Salamancans as being one of
I'm going to get an icon tomorrow.
Yeah, the early Catholics to talk about this theory of subjectivity. But this commentator, his name is Covarrubias. He said the value of an article does not depend on its essential nature, but on the estimation of men, even if that estimation may be foolish. Thus, in the Indies, wheat is dearer than in Spain because men esteem it more highly, though the nature of wheat is the same in both places. Another way to think about this is like, God gave us water for free. God gave us air for free. God gave us light for free. These are probably the most valuable commodities, but they're
Time.
free. And the reason is because like humans, like humankind decides on like the price of goods in the market. And that's just kind of the way that it works. And so I think that is, that's true for everything. And so you can think about now this strange world that we're moving into, which is like the digital world. And I don't know about you guys, like in my family, we have thousands of digital photos on these things. Mm-hmm. And Drew, I met your daughter here before this call. I mean, I imagine you have photos of your daughter, right?
Yeah, it's insane, dude. That's like all that's
Does
on
that
my
have
phone.
value to
Yeah,
you?
he's
Like,
got
does
his
that?
kids.
Halloween. We dressed
Now,
up
let
like
me ask.
dinosaurs.
Now we probably have these on some cloud server somewhere, but I don't know about you guys. Like, if Apple or Google or whoever we're using as our server right now decided to shut it down and say, "Hey, you need to pay us a few $100s or $1,000 to recover these photos," I would say I'm going to pay for that because there is monetary value to it. And so I think
What
people
you're
get
saying
hung
is
up on
get your Bitcoin off the exchanges.
Yeah, I mean, people get hung up on the fact that we now have these digital goods, and it's super weird because it's so new. But like at the end of the day, we make the market, and we've decided that these things have value. Drew's YouTube channel has value. If someone decided to shut down his channel and delete his videos, Drew would probably say, "Hey, can I pay for my recordings, like so I can store them on my own devices?" So I think that's one of the ways to think about this is like, yes, it's weird that this is a digital good. However, it has value because we've decided that it does. And I think that's an important piece to this.
So I'll just take what you said and just make it and just kind of bring it down a little bit. I have some friends from Brazil, and down in Brazil, you can work a minimum wage job and get a 4-year degree with little to no student loan debt. Here, you have to like sacrifice your firstborn just to get out of student loan debt almost. Just the cost of college is astronomical, even though it's basically the same thing. But it's a degree from the United States. And so there's almost, in my mind, the way I see it, it's almost arbitrary. You take a bunch of buyers and sellers, you put them together in a group, they create a market of a good. And it's just the fallacies behind that perception of that good. Oh, because it's from the Indies, or the wheat's from Spain, or the wine's from France. Here I am, poor, drinking Napa Valley wine. No,
You're drinking that $2
$3 Chuck.
What was the rice wine?
Oh, sake.
Oh gosh, he brought the grossest sake over to my house one time. That's what you're drinking.
Who doesn't like sake?
No, sake's great. That sake is not great.
Whatever. So
Anyways.
yeah, I don't know, like So you mentioned about the digitization of everything, and not to go too off the rails, but when the internet first came out, it was like, what's up with this internet thing? Like, why? Okay, so I go to this website. There's just a bunch of words on there. Okay, there's just a digital bulletin board. And then as the internet grew and as it evolved, we went from, it's kind of like a baby, kind of like Drew's daughter. It starts off as a baby. It has to learn how to roll over roll over. Then it needs to learn how to crawl, and then it needs to learn how to walk. That's the exact same thing with technology. You're going from a web 1.0, where it's just you consuming information off of a website, and then we go to web 2.0 with social media, where we can not only consume information, but now we can provide information.
Sure.
So your Facebooks, your Googles, your Facebooks, your Twitters, your YouTubes. So now we are in a web 2.0 place. Well, now what we're seeing is kind of web 3.0, give or take. Well, our generation is the guinea pig of the internet, of the age of information. Now, how do we take back control of that information instead of just being cash cows to Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk at Twitter? So that's why you're seeing websites like Noster, which is it's an acronym, notes and stuff, notes and other stuff on Rails. And so the idea is that they're using blockchain and creating these rails, so it's not just a centralized algorithm at these tech giants dictating what you see on your feed. You now have specific control of, okay, I just want to see what Caitlin Long is saying. Okay, now I just want to see what Jeff Bezos is saying. And I have that specific feed, and there's, none of the ad and, the ads that just...
The endless doom scroll of TikTok is curated to you.
That's a whole other problem.
Yeah, I totally... I totally agree. And I think there's like this weariness of like the Zuckerbergs of the world and the panopticon and the metaverse, that, I think is just in the zeitgeist right now, like
Mhm.
folks that are, our age and younger and actually older too. Like there's just a general skepticism of technology where I think, people are growing skeptical that, technology itself is bad when really it's implementations of things like the internet that, probably need to be reformed or need to be improved
Mhm.
upon that are driving us nuts. Like the panopticon and the pods that we're all going to live in. Like nobody wants that.
Right.
But
You can see bugs.
um, technology itself is not bad. And so like, in fact, technology itself is is a force for good and a force for human prosperity. And so I think we would be foolish across the
Wait,
world right now. That's amazing, and there's benefit to
there it
that.
goes.
Drew is evangelizing new Catholics because of his show. That's really cool, and there's a benefit to that technology. So technology itself is not bad. We have to use it correctly, and as you point out, there's been implementations of the internet that have not gone on well. But Bitcoin improves upon the current situation in the internet right now.
First there are cars, then there are car accidents, then there are car laws.
Yeah, that's kind of how it goes.
The title to your house is nothing more than a physical NFT. So if we start with the JPEGs and then we work our way and figure out how to make it more efficient, last year there was a house in Florida that sold for $75,000 as an NFT on the Ethereum blockchain. It's not going to be widespread, but now we're taking these non-fungible tokens of all these things that we use in our everyday lives. Now we're putting them on the blockchain, and we're making the process of buying and selling money, real estate, so much more efficient and lowering costs at the same time.
I think that's going to be an important part of this conversation. There's a couple things converging here. One of them is I think some of the concerns about this whole issue sort of evolve around the issue of justice, actual justice,
Economic justice.
economic justice, and then also I think one of the things that we haven't really explained yet on this episode is what the blockchain is. I bet there's probably an interesting way that kind of converges, right? Because I guess maybe I'll just kind of take a stab at it from the layman's perspective, and you guys can kind of fill in. I know one of the big concerns we all have about money is that it's that it's usable, that it's actually available for us to use. It's not being artificially inflated to where it's better off as firewood, like in the case of Germany after World War I.
Weimar Republic.
Yeah. So we want it to be like safe, and there's like the social teaching of the church would say that the state does have a duty to make sure the currency isn't becoming that essentially, but then also that money takes the human person into account, right? That we can't just like I guess I don't really know where I'm going to go with that, but like there's like the whole human dignity of like money should take into account markets, economics, all of that should take into account the dignity of human persons, and then at the same time that you can't just have a system where someone owns everything and everyone else just kind of becomes their slave, which we're kind of seeing that with like the tech world, right? And that's kind of what we're seeing.
Well,
so I think that's some of the concerns people have is like, well, then aren't we just giving that control to Bitcoin? Which I know the answer there is blockchain and decentralization. So maybe if you guys want to talk about that and tell us how does Bitcoin actually maybe address those concerns, and then then we can get into what the blockchain is. So.
Let me frame it in a different way, because I think this will be very good to start starting point. Where does solidarity and the common good intersect? 'Cause I'm assuming that's those are the two like balancing points, right? Because you have the solidarity of the individual, but then you have
subsidiarity
subsidiarity
and solidarity, and then human dignity and the common good.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so subsidiarity being the Catholic social teaching principle that that authority, rulership, agency should be at as localized a level as possible until otherwise necessary. So like basically you should have control over your own life. Your local community should be able to manage their own affairs until such a situation as they're not possible, and then a competent higher authority would step in. And then solidarity would be that even in large groups of people, there should be some solidifying factor that unites all the people around their common efforts. And then so sort of parallel to those would be human dignity and the common good.
Okay, yeah.
So
subsidiarity.
I think
Andy, you want to take that one on?
Yeah, I mean, I think both both of those things are addressed by, at least in an ancillary way, by the inflation problem that Bitcoin fixes. So, for with regards to solidarity, if you want to have like solidarity for the labor class, for example, which goes all the way back to like Leo the 13th, talking about families that were dealing with the industrialization of the economy. So I think inflation, it's becoming, cooler to talk about inflation now because it's like in the headlines, whereas, 3 or 4 years ago, like nobody was talking about it. Right. But we have had inflation for 100 years, as as Daniel alludes to with the Creature for Jekyll Island book, at least 100 years, and in the U.S. economy, on the U.S. dollar. And inflation, I would say, is just bad for that class. It's bad for the lowest in our society. It's bad for savers. It's bad for like retirees on fixed income. Inflation is bad for those who are averse to investing and don't want to speculate in things they know nothing about. Mm-hmm. Inflation is bad for those who are debt averse and don't want to take on a large amount of debt. It actually, in a perverse way, in an inflationary environment, you should take on debt. It's like the smart thing to do. And I think that is, it's not necessarily a righteous thing to do, but it is kind of like the financially.
Do I smell Dave Ramsey?
And so I think that's a piece with solidarity that is probably downplayed. And it would be really cool actually if a bishop or a pope would write on the inflation problem, because I think that would be an area of addition to Catholic social teaching that we haven't had, at least in out of the recent popes. And so with regards to subsidiarity, I think the correlation could just be about the way that by removing the money printer, the power of the money printer from the state diminishes the power of the state. Okay. And so what I mean by money printer is, pardon?
I said based. When you said removes the power from the state, I was like, based. Keep going.
Yeah. I mean, you can think about here, you can think about like, when I say inflation, I don't just mean the general rise in goods. I mean like the classical definition of inflation, which is really just an increase in the money supply, or sometimes it's an increase in the money supply above and beyond like the natural demand or something like that is the way it's defined. But just think about, at least in a fiat economy, just, creating more money essentially is inflation.
So borrower is slave. If the borrower is slave to the lender in a fiat inflationary based financial system, you are incentivized to basically enslave yourself to JP Morgan Chase and your mortgage. That's essentially what I'm hearing you say. But then also I would say that it's weird because all these things just tie to the like a single focal point, and it's almost really beautiful. Like I mentioned before the call, Roya Mahbub, who is a woman from Afghanistan, who she remembers when the Taliban took over Afghanistan. She was able to go to school and she was able to read and write, and then all that just came to an abrupt end. She is, and this is all based on Alex Gladstein, who's the chief strategist at the Human Rights Foundation. He wrote a really good article about her. But basically, she convinced a internet cafe owner to let her into the cafe and let her learn how to work on computers and how to read and write. She got all her female cousins along with it. And she was like one of the very few women in the country allowed to go outside the home and stuff, because this is a Muslim country, obviously. And she was getting her company started and everything was great. She started paying her female employees, wasn't doing anything for them.
You guys hear my daughter? She's fine. She's just eating lunch.
No. So Roya would pay her female, like 78% of her company at the time was all female. And she paid her female employees cash. Well, they can't just go to a bank and open a bank account because they're women. And not only that, it would get confiscated by either the brothers, the husbands, or the fathers. So then she learns about Bitcoin in 2013, 2014, and everyone has a cell phone. And she basically became the exchange. Like, she would pay them in Bitcoin, but then also if they needed to go to the grocery store, then they would exchange it for actual cash at the time. And she remembers saying, the ladies love it. It was like for the first time they were able to taste economic freedom in a culture, in a society that didn't afford that to them. Now, on the other side, where you have the subsidiarity of the person and the justice that comes to that person. So now it becomes a question of, okay, well, we have to agree on some kind of money, and we also have to trust someone not to print it out the wazoo or just create new units of it out of thin air. Where I see a massive opportunity, and this is weird coming from me because I'm not Catholic or anything, but looking at Catholicism from a bird's eye view, understanding the Pope and the blah, 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 it's almost as if the Catholic Church has a very unique opportunity to adopt, kind of like how Latin's the official language of the Vatican.
Bitcoin's the currency. Is that what you're going to say?
Bitcoin, the official currency of the Vatican, because...
Pope coin.
Not even, dude. Don't even joke about that. Not only does Bitcoin bring economic opportunity and subsidiarity to the individual and the economic justice that comes with it, but there's no way for the Pope or any of the cardinals or some synod of Satoshi to bring more units of Bitcoin. It completely cuts out the temptation that every single government in history has failed to avoid, of printing more units of a currency. So that's my soapbox.
That is interesting. I think it's an interesting idea of, like, at the very least, I think what both of you guys have kind of talked about is that it does solve some key problems. And just to kind of summarize that in a way for, just for people listening, on the one hand, for the individual, Bitcoin being instant, being really secure because of encryption, and because of the way the network works, it's secure, but there doesn't have to be a middleman. So therefore, there's no opportunity for a middleman to interfere or take unnecessary fees from the transactions. Like I think about the laborer, the immigrant in America who's sending Bitcoin back to, Honduras, as opposed to using like a Western Union transfer. So you have that on one end, and then on like the solidarity end, it would be something that could unite individuals across even like sovereign borders, in using a currency that they can communicate with that doesn't have a government meddling in it necessarily and printing.
It cuts out the temptation.
Have a bank. So that seems to be kind of the answer to, like, how would that fit as like a more just money system? Would you say that that's kind of a fair description of it, Andy? Is that kind of summarizing what you guys are both saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like, money allows us to trade with people that we have nothing in common with, and maybe that we are enemies with in some regards. So,
yeah.
Kind of like gold.
Pardon? Kind
of like gold.
Yeah. And so, but by cooperating with our enemies, it's a win-win, right? And so by having a kind of a more honest form of money that allows us to trade with people around the globe is just a better system. And so, I think that's part of solidarity as well too. And I mean, just if you think about it, just like the case of these laborers in Africa, it's like getting paid in good money. It's the opposite of like the anecdote that people have heard of Weimar Germany, where the factors would come out of the factory and they would immediately hand their pay to their wives, who would rush to the market to buy bread because they knew that the price was increasing every day. Wow. And so by paying your workers in an honest money that will retain its value, that is a way to kind of affirm the dignity of work and to allow them to retain to actually retain some savings. And so I think that's kind of an easy thing to understand that we all can relate to.
I think it becomes a question of control and power, and who you want to be subject to. And I don't know if you remember, Andy, but it was about a few months ago, the Central African countries that use the franc, these are all old, previously French colonized countries. Well, they still use a currency that's ultimately controlled by the French central bank. And like, I can't remember when exactly it happened, but just the amount of wealth that just evaporated because the central bank devalued that currency that they control. And so now it becomes a question of, okay, what can we use that cuts the temptation to manipulate and control currency, that respects everyone's time, energy, and money they spent to get that money so they can make a life for themselves to begin with. But then also at the same time, so that it's the control, but then also it's like, how do you respect and relinquish control but have trust right dead in the middle? I don't see any other system out there. And did you want to say something about anything you pulled up or?
Earlier he had said like, oh, it should be the official currency of the Vatican. That right now, currently, just based on their geographical location, makes sense, is the euro, just because it's like a tiny little sliver in Italy, so they're using the euro because that's what everyone's going to have in Italy.
So a bunch of
makes sense.
Other European countries, and this is partly the reason why England or why the UK broke off of the European Union. All these other countries are making decisions on a currency that you use every single day. Mm-hmm. So we need to so with the dollar, when Russia invaded Ukraine and we threw the book of economic sanctions on Russia, everyone across the board, friend and enemy, saw firsthand what kind of economic nuclear power we have. Like, you want to start messing around? We're going to throw the book of economic sanctions on you. We're going to lock up all these assets that belong to all these oligarchs. And it's just, people kind of stood back like, oh, crap.
So with Bitcoin, that wouldn't really be possible, right? Because like the network is decentralized and it would be... no one would have the ability to do that through sanctions. They could like maybe refuse to trade with the nation.
It's not in their best interest.
Right.
So this is where it gets a little crazy. So I don't know, Andy. I don't know how deep you want to go into this.
I do have a couple other directions I want to take it to. So keep in mind the depth. I guess.
I'm trying to be respectful of time. So
you're good. Well, I guess before let's kind of move in this direction too, because Andy, I know you've done some specific work on your Substack, the Bitcoin Papist. That's probably really relevant, and I'm sure everyone's been itching for us to get to, because there have been some discussions in the Catholic world, kind of as I mentioned at the beginning, about Bitcoin. And I know just from talking with Daniel and then from seeing your work that it seems like you don't agree with those conclusions. I don't really... Anyone who knows what I'm talking about knows what I'm talking about, what podcast it was on, who it was. So we don't really need to name names necessarily. Well, I mean, it's probably not really a problem. So there was a podcast on Matt Fradd where one of the New Polity guys was talking about Bitcoin, and I didn't really watch. I think I watched the full thing, but it's been so long I can't really remember the specifics of his take on Bitcoin and what he found disagreeable with it. But I do know that you have written some about that in response, and Andy, you've kind of called for a bigger Catholic conversation on Bitcoin. So can you kind of initiate us into that and tell us, what were the arguments against it, and then are those valid in your perspective? And not to just make this a proxy debate where that person's not here or whatever, but what was kind of your take on that whole situation? Because I know everyone listening is probably just itching that's in the back of their mind, that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a new technology. It's a new movement. It is, the road is fraught with peril. So I've been wrong in this before, as I said at the beginning of this, and I'll probably be wrong again. And so I think the place that I'm coming from is a place of learning and understanding and trying to understand like what is the opportunity and what is the risks right now. And so I think that's kind of where I'm coming from. And so I think, but I do think the church should have a lot to say about this. Like that, I think that is kind of what I would like. That is really what I'd like to see. Like there are moral issues at hand here. We've just been talking about a few of them. Like in my view, I think fixing the problem of inflation is what Bitcoin fixes first and foremost. And I think understanding that inflation is not an act of God. It's not the invention of greedy capitalists that just decided to raise prices, but what it is just like I said earlier, it's an increase in the money supply. And by having a technology that can put an end to that problem, I think it's a force for good. And I think it's a shame that the the Catholics, they're either not involved in this conversation at all, or if they are involved, it's just completely dismissive. And it's not that like there's good critiques of Bitcoin, but like I haven't seen them from my brothers in Christ yet. A lot of it sounds like just sort of the same talking points that you hear from like like Elizabeth Warren or something like that. I'm not talking about anybody specifically, but like there are good critiques of Bitcoin, but like I would like to hear them from some of the Catholic critics. But let me just give you a brief rundown as to what I think our heritage is here as Catholics. So there are commentators in the church tradition that are explicitly Catholic that talked about the problem of inflation. You guys may have seen this guy on the image behind me.
Who is
This
that?
this fellow in this picture. He's a 13th century French bishop named Nicolas Oresme is his name. I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. And he was one of the original commentators on basically how the debasement of money was sinful. Oresme was a 13th century French bishop. He was noticing in France at the time that there was rising prices, and he was pinpointing that on the princes debasing the money. So like what would happen is like the monarchs or the princes would collect the coinage, they would melt it down, they would add base metals and then redistribute it and essentially take seigniorage for themselves, or they would like clip the edges of the coins.
Yep.
That's why you might see like the edges of old coins
Mm-hmm.
have like clippings on them. That's the reason for that.
The grooves on the side of coins is why they keep the kings from coin clipping. Very few people know that.
The grooves. So Oresme, he wrote kind of at least in Bitcoin circles, it's sort of a famous piece. I think it's called Demoneta. And it said, if the prince has the right to make a simple alteration in the coinage and draw some profit from it, it is probable that he or his successors would go on doing this either of their own motion or by the advice of their council as soon as this was permitted, because human nature is inclined and prone to heap up riches when it can do so with ease. And so the prince would be at length able to draw to himself almost all the money or riches of his subjects and reduce them to slavery. And this would be tyrannical, indeed, true and absolute tyranny. So this is the way our bishops used to speak in 13th century. They didn't parse words. They would call out the injustice that was the debasement of money. And so that's debasement. Over the centuries, other Catholic commentators kind of added to that the debasement idea, the idea that like increasing the money supply, so just like adding more money was another way to increase inflation. And so the way that this happened is, if you know anything about history, the Spanish, who were the early explorers of the Americas, what they were really looking for, I mean, dating back to Columbus, was gold. And they would find gold, they'd bring it back to the peninsula. And that is, for at least a brief period of time, the way that Spain became very wealthy before they learned their lesson. And sort of, the dream kind of fell apart after like the 1500s were over. And throughout this period of time, Catholic monks, many times called the School of Salamanca, were the first to comment on how the increase in the money supply surely must have been the reason for that increase in inflation. And so this is very much part of our heritage. We've been talking about it for centuries. Unfortunately, you won't see it like any modern encyclicals, but a lot of these guys were the progenitors of like modern day economists, in particular like the Austrian school, but were even influence of like the classical influencers of the Catholic classical economists as well too. So I think that's very much part of our heritage. I think we can be proud of that as Catholics. And a lot of Bitcoiners mention these guys. They mention Oresme. They mention the Salamancans, but none of these people are explicitly Catholic. But I think we as Catholics should embrace this, and we should make this sort of part of the conversation right now, because it is like everyone sees inflation all around us. I do this this little thing where I do the Casey's Pizza inflation index. Do you guys have Casey's
I
Pizza?
saw it on Twitter. It's pretty funny.
I don't know if you have it out where you're
we
at.
don't have
but yeah,
Casey's
I mean,
Pizza, no. But
the price of Casey's Pizza is up like 18% in the last year. If you're in the Midwest, you know what I'm talking about. That's my version of the Big Mac index. Everybody has their own version of the way inflation affects them, but that's not an accident. That happens because of the kings clipping the coins.
Yeah, I'm sure your grocery bill has doubled like mine in the last couple of years.
Milk is so expensive.
Seriously.
It's bad.
It's bad.
So, okay. So Andy, what would you say? So you kind of mentioned that like most of the critiques that you're seeing coming from the Catholic blogosphere and YouTube world kind of fall flat. What are they critiquing? Because if it's, I mean, obviously the things that you guys have mentioned, and I'm not really involved in this conversation a ton. It seems like the things you've mentioned are within the Catholic heritage, but then B, would actually answer some of what I've seen to be more of the immediate concerns of moral theologians. Is it just that like the conversation is missing those points, or are they concerned about other components of the technology, or what, from your perspective, what have you seen as the main concern that they are addressing in the Catholic world? I mean, I haven't really kept up.
I don't know about you guys, but like I kind of would like to live in Steubenville, Ohio. Like it just seems, I'm serious. Like it seems like a nice community. There's a lot that's overused, but that the intentionality about like being an actual polity or an actual community. Mm-hmm. I think there's this sense that it's better to get back to localism. And therefore, like by us dealing in the digital world, like that is a step away from localism. And so I think there is that disconnect there where, a lot of times you hear some of these folks talk about like, well, we need to value real goods and we need to value like real property. So for example, securing like a piece of land or a house or tools or things like that, which by the way, of course I agree with. But that would be at the expense of having a digital good. So I think like a lot of it comes down to that thing we said earlier about the digital good. And the idea I think is like, well, then we can have a local polity. You don't need to transact online. You can, maybe you barter, or maybe you have like a local shop or something like that. And I mean, we all want to live in the Shire, right? Like, doesn't it seem sort of like an idyllic? I'm not actually saying that sarcastically. Like I'm dealing with this conflicted thing too, where it's like we're living in the digital world and yet we all see the value in having a localism in our life as well too. So it's like trying to bring those two sides of it together is a challenge. And but at the end of the day, like I think we're still right that like digital goods and digital money can exist and can have value. I think we know after 15 years of it that that's the case. So what do you guys think about that? Like, do you see how the affirmation of localism is maybe at odds with what we're talking about here?
I can totally see how that would be a temptation in the conversation. And so I guess at that point this becomes really philosophical more than anything. Because I would view myself as more of a localist than anything. Like I really love the idea of like the local production of goods. Right. And like I think that's a really good way to build a strong economy that's also secure, but that's also not dependent on things like large government subsidies. Like one of the things that when I learned it shocked me is that pretty much every nation in the world has assembled what I will coin a sort of mafia of postal workers who have fixed subsidies for shipping rates. One of the countries that benefits from this is China. It's cheaper to build a cup in China because of slave labor, essentially. And it's also cheaper to ship it to my house from China than it would be from Utah because of like fixed shipping subsidies, right? Whereas I would say it's like from a Catholic perspective, it would be more economically just to pay a fair wage to someone that I know is working in good conditions and is near me. It would also be just to my neighbor to give them, like a good job and just good work where they can actually utilize their skills. And then B would be more economically, and you could even say environmentally just to have it come from like Utah, which from our perspective is our neighboring state, as opposed to China. Like you think about the impact. And so to fix a subsidy to make it to where it's actually cheaper from China, that actually like negates a lot of those things. So I think about that, like localism is good for that reason, in my opinion. And I love to buy like local meat and things like that when I can.
It's jerry-rigging supply and demand with extra steps.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
That was a Rick and Morty reference. That's great.
Hang on, I'm sorry, I don't follow. What do you mean by that?
Like I think so. If there's a Rick and Morty clip where he like invents a whole universe and they all power his battery and he basically enslaves them. And he's like, well, I've created a whole network and I've I'm forcing them to do it, but they don't know I'm forcing. And the guy goes, oh, it's slavery with extra steps. So he's saying it's kind of jerry rigging supply and demand with extra steps. Like you have a subsidy for shipping, so it makes it seem like supply and demand is working with China, but really we're falsifying that effect by making it cheaper to ship. And really it's really the actual cost isn't cheaper, but there's like a subsidy that the government is using from your taxes to make it cheaper to kind of force that relationship that wouldn't naturally exist.
With the localism, I get it. I love it. I'm for it.
He hires me, so
most of the
not the best, but I'm here.
You are the best, dude. No. So most of the food that we consume here in Montrose, little old Podunk, Colorado, most of the food we consume here comes from other places.
Yeah.
There's a company that produces a boatload of eggs, and we're shipping them in other places.
Yeah, that's true.
There's only one grocery store that sells those eggs that were made here. Mm-hmm. My mother-in-law was somewhere, I don't remember where, back on the Front Range, and she found a jar of Montrose-made honey.
That's so funny.
But the people
you can't find it here.
The honey that's produced in Montrose can't sell in Montrose because all the other shops around town, now we're competing.
They got that funny honey from China.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Oh, wait. It gets worse. Now go any farmer in this town, you mention water.
Oh yeah, that's fighting words. We have a water summit here, Andy, and every year they print mugs that say "whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting," and that's like
I've read James Michener's Centennial. Did you guys ever read that?
No.
It's the history of Colorado. It's got a whole chapter on the water history of Colorado. So I know Anyway,
so if we want to localize water, Phoenix
doesn't exist.
Vegas,
right.
SoCal, they're gone.
Yeah, just like
that. Here's what I'd say is the principle is still just subsidiarity and not localism necessarily. Subsidiarity would trump localism. So, if you truly have if you truly have your own local money, that will restrict your ability to trade with people like that have water, for example.
We had that back in the colonial America days. Every state had their own currency, and now you're having to go back and forth between the two and the exchange rates. Right. So there's that fine line and that fine balance you have to find.
Do you think? Okay, and I'll give you both a second on this one. Do you think that? It seems to me like one of the things that we are kind of seeing emerge with technologies like Bitcoin, and you've kind of mentioned some of these, and Andy, you've mentioned some, is that in a way, if it's implemented, it can actually foster those local connections. Like you had mentioned the Muslim women who are using it to, bolster economic activity without the state knowing. That's kind of cool. We've talked about, people sending money across geographical boundaries, but I could even see it potentially lowering that barrier within communities in some interesting ways. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Like, could this solution, even though it seems top down, it seems like it'd have to be a global thing, which seems maybe like anti-localist, but could it actually help that movement in a way? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Here's the way it directly helps. So it directly helps by the fact that you could exchange Bitcoin for goods and services. So I was at an event last week where a local cattle rancher, grass-fed cattle rancher, was talking about how he sells and accepts Bitcoin for beef in his local community. And so that is, it's an advantage above gold and silver because it's really hard to make change with gold and silver with the price of gold at $1,800 an ounce. Whatever it is. And it does improve upon just physical cash. Not that there's anything wrong with physical cash. Like, I'm glad we still have it. But at the end of the day, like, the government can still debase your physical cash. Like it's a melting ice cube while it sits in your wallet, whereas that's not the case with Bitcoin.
Good old Michael Saylor saying right there.
The second way that it helps is more opaque, but it's probably more important by removing the power of the money printer from the government. There is less power for the government to be able to take centralized control over our local polities in various ways that we all probably see. Maybe you guys don't see as much in a small town, but here in Kansas City, the federal government is involved in the local public schools, which makes no sense. Like, why is the federal government teaching our children? And in an ancillary way, there's this idea of the Cantillon effect, where when somebody is really close to the money printer, when Goldman Sachs has a very strange relationship with the Federal Reserve, where they're like the first bank to receive base money, Goldman Sachs essentially is the first bank to get fresh money that's printed in an inflationary environment. So by the time Goldman Sachs get it, they can acquire assets and they're thrilled with that idea. Whereas by the time it finally gets to like the lowly worker, the money is already worth less than what it was when it was created. And so that is a very obscure way, but very important way that like, I don't know, you could see maybe some of the bigness be, for lack of a better word, some of the bigness be decreased in the system, where you hear about like, the large companies keep getting larger. There's not anything
zombie
wrong
companies
necessarily in essence, but if it's done through like this strange, weird relationship of the Cantillon effect, where big companies are sort of closer to the money printer in the way that our financial system is organized, you could see that maybe that would be the renaissance of some of the smaller operations that I think you and I, like we're talking about here, that we'd love to see kind of return.
So just to kind of give a visual, so Richard Cantillon came up with the Cantillon effect, where if you have like a plate and you squeeze like molasses or honey on that plate, it's not like water where it just evenly spreads itself out because it's very, because of its density, but because honey has a thicker density, it takes a very long time for that honey to spread across the plate evenly. So by the time you get that newly printed money, prices for everything else, including but not limited to the stock market's already taken off. And so I try to help my clients understand just the basic principle of buy low, sell high. Oh, it's low. Great. Buy at a discount. You know what I mean? So the other thing I'll mention too, I mean, I pay my barber in Bitcoin.
That's so awesome.
I pay my chiropractor in Bitcoin.
You don't pay me in Bitcoin.
Because my wife.
Oh, she's gonna watch this. You're gonna get in trouble.
Okay, it's a business expense. I have my own personal Bitcoin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Anyway, hopefully with the new IRS rules, we'll figure something out. Anyway.
I'll take Bitcoin from you.
Yeah. So aside from paying my barber and stuff in Bitcoin, let me kind of address a bigger picture. So Hamas gets about $300 million in operating revenue every year. Most of that's going to come from the tariffs on imported goods into Gaza. The other chunk is going to come from international ties with Iran. In September of this year, the U.S. government just paid $6 billion to release 5 American prisoners, which, I'm happy that they're home safe. But we gave $6 billion to Iran a month before the Hamas attacks and the war in Israel. So now you have...
Not good optics.
Right. So now you have... And the United Nations will tell you straight up, 2 to 5% estimated, 2 to 5% of our $100 and some odd trillion global economy is laundered every single year.
Yo.
That's 2 to 5% of a global economy for things. I mean, we did a live stream when Sounds of Freedom hit the theaters.
Like the biggest thing.
And it's like how much, like what did Change Analysis say? It was like for last year it was like 0.2 something percent of all crypto transactions between Bitcoin and all the other crap coins out there is used for nefarious purposes. Do you remember that, Andy?
Yeah, I do remember that. And I usually roll my eyes at that because I often think like how many crimes were committed in Toyota Corollas last year? Like, why aren't we going after the nefarious purposes of the Toyota Corolla?
Well, why aren't we sending the Second Marines into the jungles of Colombia to get rid of these human traffickers? Mm-hmm. And I got a quote from there's War is a Racket is a book written by Major General Smedley D. Butler. He was a major general.
That's a name, dude.
That's the name of a guy who was a 2-time Medal of Honor recipient.
Okay.
In like early 20th century. Anyway, so Marine Corps Major General, right? He writes a book called War is a Racket, and he talks about how, he basically made Haiti and the Dominican Republic a safe place for all these bankers and all the sugar interests we have, the oil companies in China. And so he basically goes on this whole list of countries and things that he did for the benefit of big business. And at the end of this particular quote, he says, what Al Capone did in 3 districts, I did on 3 continents. I could have given the guy pointers.
Wow.
So, and let me tie it all back and bring it back down to the individual level. Aside from how much money our government gives to Planned Parenthood, what's the number one reason do you suppose a young woman goes to an abortion clinic? She can't afford it. She's not economically ready. So there's a lot of economic issues that are being addressed, which in my theory could help combat something like abortion.
You think Bitcoin could? That's kind of what you're saying?
Yeah,
Like
so
something like
that's what I'm saying.
Decentralization.
Yeah, so decentralization of the money, getting the money printer out of the hands of the government, respecting the time, energy that people output to to build their wealth and to establish. And here's another thing, taking their time preferences and putting it miles and miles away. Right now in America, we're all about consumerism. We get this money. Oh, I got to spend it because the price of it is going to go up. I am incentivized to buy as much as I can now. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I take my time preference with Bitcoin and put it way the heck out there,
you're incentivized to save it.
You're incentivized to save. So I got friends all the time that tell me, since I've been in Bitcoin, like, oh, I want to get that iPhone. But then they think, I want to buy Bitcoin with whatever money I have. I can live with my phone that I have now. So and I think as believers, like, we can take that a next step further and think, okay, what is the eternal time preference can we have? So
that's interesting. Andy, you had mentioned earlier in an ancillary way about my podcast getting taken off YouTube. I think that was a statement that's going to get it done. No, I'm just kidding. That's going to be the one that gets me taken down. No, we've said crazier things on here that I have not been deleted for. So I think that puts some really interesting points to it. I think there's a lot of ways where it seems like Bitcoin could be a good and beautiful thing. A lot of common people still have their fears, and I think we've covered a lot of that. What would you guys say to, like, the average client that's sitting across the desk? You guys get these questions all the time. So, like, someone listening to this that wants to learn more about it, where are you guys going to learn about this stuff? What resources can you recommend for them to, like, maybe dive into Bitcoin a little deeper and think about it? Because, I mean, I think this is a conversation that should be started and maybe encouraged more so that we can figure it out, and people kind of, are probably going to want to do that on their own a little bit, as well as listen to shows like this. So, I mean, maybe we'll start with you, Daniel. What kind of books, resources, podcasts?
There's a lot. So as far as, like, the financial planning, wealth planning aspect, Andy's a CFP, my wife's a CFP. We got, like, in our office alone, there's like 4 or 5 advisors. So definitely the big first step is finding someone, a fiduciary, who calls themselves a fiduciary, because there's a lot of legal aspects to that. But just finding a fiduciary and just ask them, what is it about Bitcoin? What are the goods and what are the cons? Like, why are all these people telling me about this and evangelizing about it? So other than myself, I mean, I have my certificate in blockchain and digital assets from the Digital Assets Council of Financial Professionals. So there's a lot. It's basically like the CFP-ish, but it's more centralized for crypto and stuff like that in general. So finding someone that's that's a fiduciary, that's competent, is a really good first start. The other, I've put on seminars. I got, if you go to Eldorado's Financials YouTube page, you'll see a seminar I did a few years ago that probably needs to be updated now. So I talk a lot of the main, I address a lot of the cons that people say about Bitcoin. But yeah, I mean, if it depends on the person. Like, if you're a person that needs to read it, The Truth About Crypto by Rick Edelman's a really good one. The Bitcoin Standard and any of Saifedean Amos's books. I mean, the Fiat Standard is like bigger, but there's a reason why. So those are really 2 good books. Yeah, those are just kind of the basics. I think The Price of Tomorrow is another good book. There's a Canadian guy. I can't remember. Do you remember his name, Andy? He's like with Preston Pysh all the time.
The Price of Tomorrow guy.
Yeah, what's his name? I'm
I've read the book, but the name escapes me. It's all about how deflation will bring upon prosperity.
Yeah, and that's basically the name of the game. Like the amount of value the internet itself has brought on to our local economy is very deflationary. The cost of TVs, the cost of TVs have stayed relatively.
Yeah, you can get a really good TV for like $200 now.
Yeah, and like
crazy.
If you adjust, if you would adjust that for normal inflation, it should be a lot higher than what it is. And and that's the biggest thing is reject inflation. Think in terms of what we can do that's deflationary, and that's pretty much I would say the main thesis for Bitcoiners.
Cool. Andy,
I do have to point out, Daniel, that I think you're a little overly confident on how much help fiduciary advisors will be. In my experience, there aren't that many financial advisors that can speak intelligently about Bitcoin, but you're one of them. So.
Yeah, no, you are too, and that's why I got so excited about this conversation. It's like someone who gets it, So, and that's really important. It's because I am recommending in our practice, we have very specific rules in how we recommend Bitcoin to clients. I am recommending something that in turn puts me out of my job. Why the hell would I do that? Because whether or not it benefits me economically or not, the advice I have to give you and I want to give you is ultimately in your best interest. And that's why I kind of focus on the fiduciary. So if you find a fiduciary and they're not knowledgeable about Bitcoin, I mean, dacfp.com is, I think, a good resource to find those advisors like myself with the certificate. I mean, you're part of another group of advisors. I'm trying to remember. Morgan, I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah. Morgan Richard is one of the good people
Richard,
in the space. And she's great. And she's married to a guy named Pierre Richard, who's one of the sort of the Bitcoin OGs. And we started a little CFP network of our own as well too, called the Bitcoin Financial Advisors Network. But yeah, I mean, what you're talking about, like when I finally sort of saw the light and had my come to Jesus on Bitcoin, my first reaction was maybe I need to quit my job, because one of the lessons or one of the futures that we could be headed towards is just like this extreme amount of definancialization could happen, where one of the things that we've seen is an excessive amount of just financial engineering that exists in our economy today, or like maybe just like an oversize of the financial system in general. There's a sense that, like, I think it was Guido Holzman that said, in a fiat economy, like the last entrepreneurs are the bankers, because they're the ones that are making all the final decisions. And so when I had that come to Jesus about how Bitcoin could definancialize everything, because people will just go back to saving money again, I thought, well, maybe I should quit my job and go back to painting houses. And maybe I will. But one of the easy ways I could sort of do this is just be one of the financial planners, like you are, that, is just recommending it to clients. And there's plenty of opportunity for that, as there's still a lot of scams out there that people need to be aware of. And, there are best practices and right ways to do these things. And
just having the knowledge of, because I got clients that are just like, you take the money, you do what you need to do, just give me Bitcoin exposure. And that's great. And I got other clients that are, okay, let's get a little bit of Bitcoin in my account. All right, let me borrow that book from you. Let me learn about Strike. Let me learn about Trezor wallets and Ledger wallets and cold storage and hot storage and because it's a whole language. The reason why the United States will probably never switch over from the empirical system to metric is because our minds were so wired and engineered to think in terms of miles and gallons and teaspoons and tablespoons and stuff. If you just shifting into the metric system, we can have this argument about whether or not it makes sense, but just making that shift, you're taking something that we're not built to be understanding and just expecting us to just kind of go with it.
I'll never get over the irony, though, that the people who rebelled against the imperial Britons used the imperial standard. It's just kind of funny. That's just
Because that's probably what they were taught.
that's what they were. Well, it is.
And
That the metric system came.
and not the the Rockefellers got what they wanted. They wanted a nation full of factory workers and not thinkers. And so we never taught kids how to, how economics works. We never taught them how money works, how to save, how to budget. One of the things that Drew and I have talked about before with the local Christian private schools that we have here, even the Catholic school, is just getting some kind of financial literacy. Just what is debt? Why should you not go into $100,000 of student loan debt? What other options do you have? Our brains were just never taught that way. And I'll say one last thing about the conflicts of interest that's out there. Most lotteries in the country donate a chunk of money to education. And this is just my theory, and I'm kind of stealing it from somebody. If kids were taught statistics, they would then learn how to calculate probability. If they learned how to calculate probability, they would calculate the probability of them winning the lottery. If kids knew how to calculate the probability of them winning the lottery, they would never play the lottery.
I buy tickets, dude.
Yeah.
It's my only shot. Inflation. I got lottery's my only hope.
Lotteries and casinos are both a tax on the poor.
Pretty much.
They're both a scam.
I'm still gonna.
Okay, I have to recommend one book. I have to recommend one book though.
Go for it.
Yep.
So the one book that I would recommend, especially for Catholics, but anyone should read this book, is a book about, again, this guy. It's called The Ethics of Money Production. And what it gets at is, we've all been taught, hopefully we've been taught that there is, of course, a proper way to use money, and there is a righteous way to use money, but it's not often talked about the proper way to produce money. And so what this book does is expands on those ideas of Erasme, which I mentioned earlier, who is talking about some of the abhorrent ways that money has been produced in the past, and the kind of ills of inflation. And if you're not a person that reads books, there is a great essay online, which is a section of the book, and it's called The Cultural and Spiritual Effects of Fiat Inflation, or something like that. And you can find it for free on the internet. It's one essay that will help people understand the problem here, which I think is kind of, for me, I've been pounding on this, but I think that's where most people need to start. Like, if they understand the problem that Bitcoin potentially fixes, the problem of inflation, I think it's a good way into to getting orange pilled.
Mm-hmm. We should put links in the bio.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you email me all that after the show, I'll put it in the description so people can find it. I definitely think the conversation around Bitcoin, this is probably just the start of it, right? And that's kind of why I wanted to have both of you on today, because it seems that our world is changing a lot. There's technologies like this coming out, and if we don't have the discussion, then we won't know how to best respond to them. So I kind of hope that this opens up, I don't want to say a can of worms, but I hope it opens up more discussions like this across the Catholic community. I've really enjoyed just kind of listening to you guys today talk about it. Hopefully it's the first of similar discussions like this. With that being said, I just want to let you guys give your plug. So Daniel, if people want to kind of find out about what you guys do, where can they go?
ElDoradoFinancial.com. You can see my bio. The certificate in blockchain and digital assets, it is officially recognized by FINRA, which is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. And then we got a plethora of other advisors with different expertise. So we're definitely an ensemble, fee only fiduciary. There's also on our YouTube page, Eldorado Financial on YouTube, there's a seminar I did a few years ago about Bitcoin, just breaking it down. I borrowed a lot from the Bitcoin standard, just to get people an understanding of what this technology is, how it's impacting our world. At the end of the day, that's what it is.
Nice. And Andy, where can they find more from you?
Yeah, the podcast is called The Reformed Financial Advisor on podcast platforms, and the audio is also on YouTube. The new Substack is at bitcoinpapist.com, just bitcoinpapist.com. And you should find a lot about me at those two places.
Cool. Well, hey guys, I appreciate both of you coming on. Andy, thanks for taking the time. It's easy to wrangle this guy because I know where he lives, but thanks for responding to the email and coming on and discussing it. And like I said, hopefully we can have more discussions, even just about financial practices and the faith as those intersect in general. I think that could be interesting. But everybody, head on over to Andy's podcast. Make sure you subscribe to that and listen to it. And his Substack. There was some really good stuff on there that I was reading. And with that, everybody, thanks for watching this episode. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And we will see you guys next time on Drew the Catholic.